In today's video, I want to take a look at the Toronto Maple Leafs and pose the question, is there a rift brewing between head coach Mike Babcock and GM Kyle Dubas? We're going to take a look at the latest 31 Thoughts column from Elliott Freeman, where he examines the situation. We're going to take a look at some quotes from both the coach and the GM, take a look at what's going on with the team, and see is there trouble brewing in paradise here with the Leafs and their staff. We'll discuss that situation coming up next. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams, so if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So as I mentioned, today we're looking at the Toronto Maple Leafs and the potential rift brewing between Mike Babcock and General Manager Kyle Dubas. Anytime you see teams in a losing skid or any kind of a funk, sometimes there becomes friction, and obviously at times you might see guys like Babcock and Dubas kind of butting heads a little bit here. It doesn't mean that long term there's necessarily a big problem brewing, but we want to take a look at the situation with Toronto and examine if there is any conflict there and if there could be potential problems here in the future, especially if things don't go well in the playoffs. Of course, as I record this video here, Toronto kind of snapped out of their funk last night, beating the Buffalo Sabres, but their 4 or 5 games before that, things were not going overly well. They were giving up way too many goals. They lost some games that they definitely were against teams they should have won for sure, and things haven't really been going well at all. So now let's jump over to Elliott Freeman's 31 Thoughts column. We'll take a look at what he had to say about the situation, take a look at some of the interesting quotes and things we saw on Twitter regarding this, and then I'll give you my thoughts and we'll discuss the situation further. The column starts off here by saying, first, the on-ice picture. Tuesday's 3-0 loss in Nashville was the Maple Leafs' 4th in the past 5 games. During that span, they've been outscored 26-15, with 7 of their goals coming in last Friday's win over Philadelphia. Earlier in his tenure, I asked Mike Babcock what he considers the most important statistic. Without hesitation, he replied, goal differential. Toronto is now -10 against teams currently in the NHL playoff position with a record of 17, 18, and 1. They are +50 versus those outside with a record of 26, 7, and 4. Then he shows a tweet that went out on Twitter, and he says here, this was posted on the same day that the coach told the media, adversity is really important to you in life. When you don't have some, you think you should get some so you can get better. But in the same availability, Babcock questioned organizational depth. You're supposed to build the best program you can so you don't miss people, so you have enough. You don't miss a beat, and you just keep going. There's other teams that have done a better job when different players are out than we have in keeping on going. That just tells you what state we're at, and you just got to keep adding better players. Later that day, Dubas retweeted this along with a checkmark from kindred managerial spirit Houston Rockets GM Daryl Morey. Babcock is unafraid to challenge. Since arriving in Toronto, owner of the richest coaching contract in NHL history, he's challenged players, evaluators, executives, and even himself. That's who he is. He grinds and grinds and grinds some more. It's right out of Pep Guardiola and Pep Confidential. Real satisfaction comes when you start to feel that the team is really yours and is playing the kind of football you want. But that's not Babcock's vision. They did not agree on the backup goalie choice. The GM did not want Justin Hall lost on waivers, but until injuries were forced, the defenseman couldn't get into the lineup. The coach clearly is uncomfortable with a smallish fourth line, and he had a jaw-dropping quote about the Jake Muzzin trade, noting his then roster of 5 left-handed shots, saying, it's not perfect, it's what we got, it's what was available, and we're going to make it work. Line injuries plus Frederik Andersen looking merely human has exacerbated everything. It's tense, the playoffs are coming, and the pressure is rising. He then begins his 31 Thoughts column with some additional points here. Point 1. Adding to all this fact, Toronto is closing in on extension with Sheldon Keith, who coached the Marlies. Now, of course, that's also an interesting piece of information. It's been widely believed that he is one of the top coaching prospects to get a job at the NHL level, but the Maple Leafs seem very reluctant to let him maybe interview for other jobs in other teams. They really want to keep him in the organization, and it's been believed that they're going to pay him quite handsomely to remain in the American Hockey League until he's ready and able to coach the big team in Toronto. There's been some even talk that he's been kind of told that basically he's next in line, and that if he's willing to stick it out with Toronto, they'll pay him handsomely until he's able to take over for Mike Babcock sometime here in the future. Whether that time comes at the end of Babcock's contract or potentially sooner if things don't work out, that remains to be seen here. Point 2 says the other really odd thing about Toronto is for all of its talent, and there is a ton of it, the team is 30th in power play opportunities with 189, only 1 ahead of Dallas. Over 82 games, that pace would put them at 212. Since the change in officiating standards in 05-06, Only 2 teams have had fewer man advantages in a full season than that. Last year's Oilers and the 16-17 Blue Jackets. You can tell it's a bone of contention amongst the team, but no one wants to come across as criticizing the lack of calls. The focus should be on repairing problems and focusing on the playoffs. Babcock's not walking away, but is anyone else wondering if this marriage is in trouble? So there you have it. There's been some very interesting comments from Mike Babcock lately during his media availability. We've seen some very interesting tweets from Kyle Dubas on Twitter. So it certainly makes you wonder if there might be a bit of a rift there. I mean, it's not totally abnormal for GM and coach to disagree on certain moves. Obviously, that's, they each have their own responsibilities. But it does seem like Mike Babcock's been doing a lot of complaining through the media about the roster he's been given and the fact that he hasn't agreed with the vision of what the team should be and the moves that Dubas has made to give him what he needs that he feels to win. Obviously, the beginning of the year when it came time to choose a backup goalie, it's no secret Babcock would have preferred to keep Curtis McElhinney. I mean, he was putting up some of the best backup goalie numbers in the NHL. So obviously his age and his unrestricted free agent status played a role in their decision to let him go through waivers, knowing that he would likely get claimed and hang on to the much younger Garrett Sparks. Although Sparks has certainly been a bit of a disappointment, I think it's fair to say. I mean, you guys as Leaf fans out there can let me know what your thoughts are on his play, but I know for the most part, he's taken a lot of criticism for his play this year, and obviously Babcock wasn't quite in favor with that original decision. We know that Babcock likes to have an even number of left shot defensemen and right shot defensemen. And even though the right side of the defense seemed to be more pressing for the Leafs to go out and acquire someone, they ended up acquiring the left shot Jake Muzzin. And not that Babcock has anything against Muzzin, but he doesn't seem to want to use him high enough up in that lineup to really, offset what he was brought in to do. Like, the whole point of bringing in another experienced top D was to kind of push some other guys down, but you still see guys like Ron Hainsey logging some of the most ice time on the team. Often nights between him and Morgan Riley, they're the two, biggest ice times, which, in Riley's case is certainly fine. He's earned the right to be their top defenseman, but Ron Hainsey really should be playing further down in the lineup, I think. I know they did try having Muzzin play with Riley a little bit. They've kind of had him in a few different spots there, at different times when he was first acquired. But Babcock, as we know, is quite stubborn and has been playing him a little bit lower. And Hainsey's still been getting more ice time, but more often than not, that third pair has been, a fairly big part of the issue, especially with injuries to guys like Gardner and Dermott. Not helping matters at all. He's been very reluctant to use Justin Hall, even though Hall's been there all year. Dubas didn't want to put him on waivers because he felt he would lose him for nothing. But at the same time, Hall's certainly not in Babcock's good books because he barely plays him. And when he does, he doesn't get a ton of ice time. You've seen guys like Martin Marincin used sparingly, but of course his play kind of dictates that, in my opinion. I'm not sure Marincin's really a regular NHL defenseman at this point. And it does look like they're probably going to have to give a chance to some of the other guys like a Calle Rosen here shortly as well, just to see, if some of the guys can come up and kind of fill those spots, depending on how they're guys that are injured and how long they're going to be out. Dermott appears to be closer to coming back, but Gardner appears to be still a ways away. I'm not quite sure the exact update on him, but obviously these two have butted heads quite a bit. It's now going public, and this is certainly not a good spot for the team to be in heading into the playoffs. So the question I pose to you is, if the Maple Leafs don't get out of the first round here in the playoffs yet again, we know they're in no danger of missing the playoffs. That is a given. I mean, even though they're not officially clinched, they're going to. There's no danger. There's too much of a gap with teams behind them. They are going to be in the playoffs. There's pretty much a guarantee they're going to play the Boston Bruins, who have been absolutely on a terrific roll here again. So can the Leafs take down the Bruins, or are they in trouble? And if they lose out in round one, is there going to be a price to pay for this? And could Mike Babcock, even with that rich contract, possibly be let go? What side would Brendan Shanahan and upper management and ownership kind of side with here? I mean, I'd have to think that for the most part, Kyle Dubas has a lot of their support. And really, if you take a look at some of the team's issues like the defense, they haven't really improved during Babcock's tenure as head coach. But I guess his argument would be that he hasn't been given the proper roster to really make those improvements, I guess. So hard to say, but as Leaf fans, I'd certainly like to know your thoughts and your opinions on this situation. Is there a bit of a rift forming here? And if the Leafs don't make it out of the first round, is there going to be somebody pay the price? And could it be the very expensive head coach, Mike Babcock? I know I've seen all kinds of griping on Twitter, especially through social media, when the Leafs lose. I've had lots of people commenting they don't appreciate how Babcock coaches. It's been a long time since he's really had NHL success. I'm not sure you can really count the Olympic victories for a whole lot on his resume. I mean, obviously those were like all-star teams, some of the best teams ever assembled. And even though he did have to figure out how to use everybody, in the right spots, it's certainly a much easier job than coaching a regular NHL club. And it's been a long time between his time with the Ducks and the Red Wings since he's been able to really get any kind of playoff success and get a Stanley Cup here. So It's hard to say what a lot of people think of Babcock, but I want to know what you guys think. Is there a possibility here that we could see a coaching change well before the end of his long-term lucrative contract if the Leafs don't get out of the first round? Now, there is one easy solution to all of this, and obviously that their players kind of get re-engaged here, play better down the stretch, and as we all know, winning tends to solve everything. If they get their act together and have a good stretch of games here down the stretch and have at least some success in the playoffs, which would have to be at least getting through one round, I would think that there won't be any changes at all, and everybody can move past their differences and they can get into the offseason and start preparing for the future here even further ahead as they have all these young players that are, still blossoming and blooming into being an even better club here potentially over the next few years. So let me know your thoughts and comments down below, and we will continue the conversation. If you're new to the channel here, I hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams, and there's plenty of content here for all hockey fans to enjoy. So if you're new, hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up before you go. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you very much for watching, everybody. We will catch you next time.